Seizing cash and valuables from refugees, Denmark takes drastic action over the deepening migration crisis as politicians elsewhere in Europe try to seal borders. Is the crackdown all about deterring new arrivals? And who cares for the desperate escaping war and conflict? This is Inside Story. Hello and a warm welcome to the programme. I'm Peter Dobby. Now, Denmark isn't the first European country to tighten controls on refugees, but a new Danish immigration law is a sign of the darkening mood towards the new refugee arrivals. The law allows the seizure of refugees' assets to help pay for their stay. Among other things, it also prevents families from being reunited for a time of 3 years. Danish politicians say the law is being entirely misunderstood, arguing that in a welfare state, everyone has to use up their own resources first before claiming government benefits. Critics say police rarely search Danes claiming state help, and the law is to deter more refugees from arriving. OK, let's bring in our guests for this Inside Story. Joining us from Hanover, Ramazan Salman, Director of Migrants for Migrants. That's a grassroots integration programme aimed at helping to integrate immigrant communities in Germany. In Birmingham via Skype, Nando Sigona, Senior Lecturer at the University of Birmingham. Nando is a researcher and specialist on the refugee and migration crisis. And in Madrid, Irene Zugasti, one of the authors of the Polytheor report, Civil Society Responses to the Refugee Crisis. A welcome to you all. Ramazan Salman, how damaging is what Denmark is doing to the refugees, to the reputation of Denmark, and also to the reputation of the broader EU?
I think what Denmark is doing, it's terrible. It's destroying a little bit the European vision of a transcultural society, of a diverse society in Europe, of a peaceful society in Europe. There are millions of immigrants in Europe who are working for the societies, who are going to schools, who are funding companies, and I don't know why they reacting so extremely against immigrants. It's not necessary. They have, in reality, not big problems with the immigrants. And I hope that what they do is not something which are seen by others and copied by others. In Germany, we have a totally different situation. In Germany, we realize that immigrants are a very important part of the society. To support immigrants, to integrate them, to motivate them to take part in the society is the strategy we are following in Germany, and we have much of success with that.
Nando, we spent most of the day in the Inside Story office reaching out to somebody, anybody from the Danish government. We're yet to get a response. The official line, however, is the law is being completely and utterly misunderstood. What do you say to that?
Well, that's an interesting spin to it. I guess if they really, what we heard from them is that this is the treatment that all the beneficiaries of the welfare state get in Denmark. However, my read of it is they're not going to get money out of the asylum seekers, or the resources they are going to be able to seize will be a very tiny percentage of the money that the reception and integration program costs. What such a law does is to work as a deterrent. So the idea is that at the moment within the European Union, everyone is competing for which country is the less welcoming to basically push people towards other destination. And the Danish government is doing exactly the same. And it's also playing with its own electorate in a sense. It's sort of giving them some comfort, in inverted commas, to the anxieties that are spread within, the European public at the moment.
Irene Zugasti in Madrid there for us. There was a refugee crisis in your country, nothing on the scale such as we're seeing right now across Europe as a whole, but there were lessons that were learnt then in 2006 into 2007. I'm interested to know what the lessons were and why those lessons haven't migrated to other parts of Europe.
Well, I think that unfortunately they had not migrated as much as I would like to. I mean, of course, in Spain we faced a very difficult situation before the economic crisis in year 2006 and 2007, with the arrival of thousands of people every day, every week to our coast and to Canary Island also, and the Mediterranean coast. And I think that moment was a moment of absolutely shock. And thanks to civil society and to grassroots movement especially, and also thanks to the will of the political agents at that time, we achieved to understand that migration crises must be tackled from a global perspective, and thus they are not just concrete moment. They in this globalized world, they have consequences which finally shake us all. So all the recipes or the measures taken by Spain at that moment were basically investing on integration policies, and thanks to that, I can say that now we don't have a backlash against immigration that there exists, for example, in countries as I don't know, Hungary, Poland, or Czech Republic, or for example, Germany with PEGIDA, which is absolutely awful. Of course, there is a few people who has that point of view, but in the main society understood that the processes of migration are much more complex than just people coming to treat what our culture and our values are supposed to be. And in that point, I do agree with the opinion of Peter that what Denmark is doing with these policies is absolutely harmful. But it's not also only Denmark, it's a lot of other states which are trying to portray the situation as negative from the beginning to the end. And that's really dangerous, because in the mid-term and in the long term, it will be really positive for Europe. So
okay, we'll get onto that issue, Irene, of culture and values in just a second,
okay.
But I just want to take a couple of moments to remind ourselves here what's going on. Denmark joins a number of EU countries trying to apparently deter refugees. In Switzerland, refugees are required to hand over assets worth more than $1,000 to the state. In the states in southern Germany, such as Bavaria, refugees must declare valuables worth more than $800 in exchange for state benefits. And Sweden has recently reversed an open door policy, launching strict border checks and a quota system. Ramazan Salman in Hanover, coming back to you. Individual countries here are surely caught in a dilemma, because it's not so very long ago, I think it was middle of last year, when the EU basically said, you are breaking the laws. And it didn't go any further than that. So there was a warning shot fired across several bows. But one would assume that relevant presidents and prime ministers would say, well, hang on, I've got to keep the integrity of my country together. And if there is a perception that all these people coming into Europe might bring danger with them, what are they supposed to do?
I think not every reaction we followed in the last 12 months was in the background of integrity, you know. For example, look on Hungary, you know. They have a big crisis with 40,000 immigrants. I can't believe that. Look on other countries. They have 10 or 15,000 at millions of inhabitants. And they are talking about the refugee crisis in their country, which is affecting them in reality not very much. Germany has accepted 1,100,000 refugees. Germany is not destroyed, the culture is not changed, you know. I think there is a potential, a resource to deal with that problem in this country. Look on Jordan, they have millions of refugees, they help people, they didn't change their rights, they are not against refugees, they help. And they have not enough resources to do that, but they are not trying.
No one is questioning, just to interrupt you for a second,
Denmark,
Ramazan, please. No one is questioning the way that Angela Merkel's government and the people of Germany have stepped up to the plate on this. But what about people reacting with fear? If we rewind to the events of New Year's Eve and New Year's Day in Cologne, now, what actually happened there as a definition is yet to come out, but people reacted very negatively to that understandably. So people maybe in Germany are looking in on the newly arrived and they're thinking, hang on, this is dangerous because real people are suffering.
The things which are happened in Cologne are not acceptable. It's not important if refugees or immigrants were involved or Germans. These things are totally unacceptable. I think in countries in which the immigration is growing, we have to respect the fears which people are having. The best reaction on that is to discuss about that by time. The things which are happened in Cologne, I know about these things since years that such things are happening. I was in relationships with police officers in Germany and I told them, make that open, discuss that. It's not necessary to have fears that there is a reaction from population. If you are seriously open to your own population, make to them and to the refugees and immigrants clear which are the rules in this country, that these rules have to be accepted, then there will be no racistic reaction on that. But they waited and waited and waited and didn't take it seriously, and because of that we have an extreme situation in a worse time, in a time in which this is really problematic, because we work at that time with so much refugees, we have to do so much important things for integration, for treating with these people, so it is not a good thing. And the reaction that the country says, okay, we want to change some of our laws in a civilized way, in a democratic way. Me as an immigrant in Germany, I respect that. I support that. But I tell to the authorities, to the stakeholders, I'm in some consultancy positions, I tell to the stakeholders, do what is necessary,
okay,
but do it not in an extreme way which is not necessary to do.
Nando, do you have a sense perhaps that
Yes.
what we saw in Cologne heightens and also makes the discourse more intense? Because on each side of this debate we have, say, what happened in Cologne, plus, you know, within the last week we've had refugees in the city of Cardiff in Wales having to wear red wristbands. The local government has now backed away from that. So it makes people more identifiable, although, as I say, they've pulled the plug on the whole thing, and therefore it brings an added negative zest, if you will, to IDing people and feeling uncomfortable around them on both sides of the what do we do to make sure people are okay debate.
Yeah, I think that the backlash of the event in Cologne, we are really starting to see it, and we will see it in the coming month. You know, and the backlash is not as much linked to the fact themselves, but is about how they provide a very easy tool for people who want to mobilize the fear of the migrants. I mean, even the day after the events came out, there were the Prime Minister of Slovenia that was already mentioned, the fact that he didn't want any Muslim coming in the country. Now we will see, you know, Denmark acting this way. We also have seen a number of events all over Europe that have been somehow linked up to the event in Cologne, that were smaller in size, but the fact that they were narrated as part of a kind of, yes, Europe is under threat. You could see these young males that are threatening our women. So it was tapping in one of those ancestral fears, of that deep fears of the European population about the Muslim and the other. And it's really important that the way that we respond to it in terms of, on one hand, to ensure, as the gentleman from Germany was pointing out, to ensure that justice is made for those who committed those crimes. But also at the same time make sure that, and I think the German Angela Merkel and the German government is doing this, to make sure that this doesn't lead to a change of policy towards the refugees. We should never forget that the people that were involved in the event in Cologne, even if some media portrayed them as a mass, a mob, you know, hundreds, maybe 1,000 people, in the end they were a really tiny minority compared to the number of people that have found protection now in Germany, and they are really trying to restart their life here. So we must also remember that, to put back things into perspective. It's paradoxical what is happening now in UK, because UK has been really very marginally involved in the immigration crisis. You know, despite the fact that we hear the Home Office in Britain taking position about the crisis, Cameron talking about Kelly. In reality, the number of asylum seekers in the UK, yes, is increased, but in a very marginal way compared to other European countries.
Irene in Madrid, just to stop you there, Nando, for a second. Irene Zugasti in Madrid. Does Nando's use of the word tools and also his use of the word response, does that chime with you? Because it occurs to me that in some senses, civil society is way, way, way ahead of what the governments seem to be able to do or they are prepared to do. And governments in Scandinavia, all over Europe, around the Mediterranean, they seem to be playing catch up.
Of course, the role of civil society is really important, but I must highlight, coming to the previous issue about colonial events, that media has an enormous responsibility in how to portray this event. I mean, of course, colonial events were terrible, but the narrations towards those events were also pretty dangerous, and they cannot be simplified, because when we are talking about violence against women, we can also see the statistics on a European level, and they are terrible and happens every day. And for example, also the aggressions that migrant women suffered and refugee women suffer by locals and by migrants during the transit process is also a very important problem which is not tackled by media. However, talking about civil society, it's really interesting to see how sometimes it has been portrayed like isolated movements, one in for example, one in Scandinavia, another one in Spain, another one in Italy, but not, they are organized, they have a will of becoming something global and something connected. So it's really interesting to see how projects as, for example, Refugees Welcome Project is working in more than 10 countries at the same time. And it's doing a lot. And
pardon me for interrupting you there, Irene. Ramazan, could it end up in a situation where people get stuck? In the last calendar year, according to UN information, UN data, it's on their website, I saw it about an hour ago, they took in 8,000 people. 2 of those people have been granted asylum. Where do the other 7,000 plus people go to? They can't go back to Syria, and they can't make the journey or finish the journey to another life, a safe life in Europe.
I think as a European, which I am now, this move is dishonoring Europe, you know. It is for me a real unaccepting thing that people are staying in Lesbos, for example, like prison, and have not the chance to move on, to live a free life and to decide where they want to be. These people, they didn't left their country because they wanted to go to another country to have a better life or something like this. They left their country because they want to overlive. They want to protect their life, that's all. And Europe, and the constitution of Europe, the human rights are basic. So I look more on the situation in Europe and I ask myself, what is happening with Europe? Is it not wrong that we have contracts together in which we decided how we deal with such situations, and then members of the European Union are deciding themselves that they are breaking these contracts and doing not the things which are clearly formalized in the Constitution of Europe. And for me, it is very important to be, as a member of the civil society, active against these developments. My opinion is that if we don't protect the European Constitution, don't respect the European Constitutions, full of democracy, full of civil rights, we will have another development in the world for the stability in the world.
Okay, thank you for that. Nando, coming to you for a second. Could it be that the governments of Scandinavia particularly are worried by 2 things? Number one, in Sweden there's a concept of utanförskap, and it's those young guys that live in what I would call council housing estates. They're angry, they're disaffected, they're disenfranchised, they're unemployed, they're unemployable. So the government has to react to that somehow. And on top of that, people like the Swedes and the Danes, they are looking at these people who are arriving and they're thinking, hang on, the demographic is going to change completely, because in a generation, these families that are coming to Europe, they feel an entitlement to have 3 or 4 children, when the birth rate in Europe is kind of going off a cliff.
Well, yeah, actually, so that basically these newcomers will provide the pensions for the aging Europeans. And I guess if I look from the perspective of Sweden, while I can appreciate that new arrival are a challenge and facilitate and help them to integrate, especially having access to job markets, is not necessarily easy or straightforward. On the other hand, the fact that they receive a very large number compared to other countries of unaccompanied minors, so young people, is also a resource because they have the chance to train them. And this makes it easier for them than to be becoming part of society, but also contribute economically. Elder refugees are much more harder to integrate from the point of view of contributing economically, because it's obviously it's harder to start a new learning a language, get qualified. So we need to think that's, you can look at the situation of Sweden also from another perspective in that sense. And also for the case of Germany, I really agree that Germany is really doing a very important initiative to facilitate access to the job market. And I think that is a crucial issue here. Because it not only it basically enables people to regain a space for their life, to rebuild their future, to feel autonomy back after maybe having lived for 3-4 years in a refugee camp, but it's also preempting one of the key criticisms coming from some part of the European society, that these people are a burden on the welfare state. If you're able to contribute to start a job, that would really help to making the anxieties of the European society, to keeping them under control.
OK. Irene in Madrid, we seem to be talking here about the idea of fragmentation versus integration, and we're moving away from integration towards some sort of fragmentation, if only because the symbolism of Europe now seems to be heading towards being a barbed wire fence as opposed to an open door.
Yes, I think that Europe has not only an economical crisis to resolve, but also an identity crisis. And of course, we have seen that some models of integration developed before, as the assimilation model in France, for example, or the melting pot, are not working. And that we have to understand that the policies of integration are basic for our future. As you said before, we are on a continent that is becoming older and older. So in a middle term, we will need those young people coming. Many of those people also coming with a very good background, academical background, labor background.
Irene, last point to Ramazan.
Fragmentation.
Last point to Ramazan, sir, in Hanover, Ramazan Salman. At the point when local spontaneous help is exhausted, because by definition it's got to run out of steam soon, what happens then if countries like Denmark keep on telling people, no, you've got to give us $1,500 worth of possessions?
I think when I hear these questions and I analyze these developments, then we see, I register it every time we talk about how the other ones are integrating us, what is happening when they change their rights. I think we have now, because of the demographic mismatch in Europe, really a big immigration to Europe, and much of things will change. The rights too. For example, we have to secure that not everybody who is not constructive for our societies can come to our countries. For example, terrorists or people who have other views on gender-based rights and these things. And in the future, I think we, the immigrants in Europe, we have much of stakeholders, we have much of expertise people who can develop the societies, who are loyal to the societies. We have to be more actors. And if I look on Denmark...
Ramazan, I'm going to have to interrupt you there because we are out of time, but it's nice to wrap up our discussion on a positive note. Thank you all. Thanks to all our guests, Ramazan Salman, Nando Sigona and Irene Zugasti. And thank you for your company over the past 30 minutes. As always, you can leave your comments on our website, aljazeera.com. You can post your views on our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. Or you can tweet the programme, AJ Inside Story, or tweet me. I'm at Peter Dobby1. From me, Peter Dobby, and everyone on the team here in Doha, thanks for watching. We'll do it all again tomorrow. Bye-bye.